serve as the governor's director of policy. I'm formerly a high school math teacher and have worked on education policy at large and now oversee policy in general for the governor.
I'm Todd Skelton. I'm the governor's deputy legal counsel. I'm an attorney that advises the governor on a variety of legal issues and from Sir Boynesville, Tennessee.
So Bill Haslam is the 49th governor of the state of Tennessee. He formerly served as mayor of Knoxville. He has 3 children, and his beloved wife, who's our first lady, is Chrissy Haslam.
Governor Haslam was elected in 2010. He took office in 2011 and was later reelected in 2014 and actually had the largest winning margin in modern Tennessee history when he won re-election. And so governor's terms are for 4 years, and the governor's near the end of his second term. The next governor is going to be elected in November and will take office in January of 2019. The state constitution sets a limit of 2 consecutive terms for a governor. Interestingly, that leaves open the possibility of a governor serving more than 2 terms. They just can't be consecutive.
So the Tennessee Constitution lays out the qualifications for serving as governor, and there are 3 of them. You have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to be at least 30 years of age to serve as governor, and you have to have lived in Tennessee for at least 7 years.
So the state constitution divides the power in the state amongst 3 departments: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And specifically, Article 3, Section 1 vests the supreme executive power of the state in the governor.
The governor serves as the highest elected official in the executive branch. In that role, he appoints 23 commissioners to each of our departments across state government. And those departments can be everything from Department of Education to Department of Safety, Department of Transportation. So many of the services that our citizens use every day are overseen by these departments who essentially are executing on his vision for the state. So everything from building roads so that you can travel to school, ensuring that the assessment you take at the end of the year is up to the standards that you've been taught during the school year. So all of that is folded into state government. The other key piece is he is essentially the CEO of a large business, is what he sometimes says, since he operates a budget of about $37.5 billion each year. So part of his role is determining how those funds can be used and allocated across our departments and how we can better serve citizens, and also where costs can be cut to more efficiently run state government as a whole.
So the governor's powers are generally derived from the state constitution. State law often will set parameters or provide some other specifics, but if you look at the state constitution, it sets out several powers for the governor. One is around the appointment of cabinet level officials, of judges, and in state law, the governor also gets the authority to appoint various state boards and commissions. So lots of professions, so doctors, real estate agents, land surveyors, you name it, are regulated by boards of industry professionals and citizens. And so the governor appoints many of those boards. In judicial selection, recently there was a constitutional amendment in 2014. It was Amendment 2 that clarified the framework and the authority for the governor to appoint appellate court judges. And so those are Court of Appeals and Supreme Court judges. who later stand for a retention election. The governor also has broad executive clemency power, and that means the power to pardon, which is to forgive someone for a criminal offense, to grant a reprieve, which is a delay of carrying out of an execution or death sentence, and also the power to commute sentences. And so that's an extraordinary thing for the governor to be able to change and reduce the sentence that a criminal defendant has received from a judge and a jury of their peers. The governor also has the responsibility of approving legislation that the General Assembly has passed, and that applies for both bills and joint resolutions that the House and Senate pass together. The Constitution also gives the power to veto legislation. The governor is also the commander-in-chief of the National Guard, and so when troops are not in a federal authority capacity, the governor is the commander-in-chief that designates how they're deployed, how resources are utilized. And then finally, going back to the General Assembly, the governor has the authority to call the legislature back into session outside of the normal session that they would have each year. And actually, during this administration, the governor's done that twice. One to consider a new healthcare provision, and then also to fix a bill that impacted federal highway funding. The governor is granted an extraordinary authority to veto legislation. And so that allows the governor to reject legislation that's been passed by the General Assembly. So that's after it's gone through the House and the Senate for both a bill and a joint resolution. And the Constitution also permits a line item veto, which specifically for the appropriations bill or the budget allows the governor to disapprove or reduce a specific appropriation. And in doing so, it only affects that one item and allows the rest of the appropriations bill to become law. The governor's used his veto power sparingly, but several times throughout the administration. I think he's vetoed 5 bills over the last 8 years, and has done so for both for policy disagreement and because of legal concerns with what that particular legislation was. The ability of the legislature to override a governor's veto is unique in Tennessee because it takes only a majority vote, which is a weak veto authority for the governor, because obviously to have passed the legislation in the beginning, the legislature would have had to pass it with a majority vote. And so I think that shows that it's really important for the governor to engage in the legislative process early on and to make it known if amendments are needed or if there's a policy disagreement. And so we'd spend a lot of time during the legislative session engaging with legislators and in the committee process to make sure that the final product that gets to the governor's desk is something that we agree with, or at least are okay with legally from a policy perspective.
So as I indicated before, the governor set as his vision for Tennessee to be the #1 state in the country to live, work, and raise a family. And so as part of that, he set out kind of 5 buckets of key policy work that he wanted to focus on during his time as governor. Those 5 would be education and workforce development, jobs and economic development, public safety, health and welfare, and then efficient and effective government. So within each of those buckets, over the last 8 years, we've been able to do some pretty phenomenal work as a governor's office and with the support of the legislators to pass programs that continue to move us forward towards his vision. Under the category of education and workforce development, we in 2013 were seen as the fastest improving state in the nation in K-12 math and reading results. We maintained that again in 2016 as well, and also found out we were the fastest improving in science. So what that means is, well, we were once a state where our math scores in fourth grade math might have been in the bottom 10 of all states. By being fastest improving, we actually moved up and were in the top half of states. And so incredible work by our educators and students across the state to move us in that direction. Another key initiative that many are familiar with is the Tennessee Promise program. This was a program passed in 2014, and it essentially allowed any high school graduate to go to either a technical school or community college free of tuition and fees. So opening the door to post-secondary education and removing what is often a barrier, which is the financial burden of paying for post-secondary education. The governor felt really passionate about this initiative because we know that by 2025, at least 55% of our jobs in Tennessee will require a post-secondary credential. And so without removing some of the barriers to access to higher ed, we know that we can't have a workforce that meets the demands of future employers. And so in addition to Tennessee Promise, most recently also was the first state in the nation to pass a program known as Tennessee Reconnect. This opened the same opportunity, so free community college or technical college to all adults. So we can now say in Tennessee, all citizens can go to community college or technical school free of tuition and fees, which is a huge perk for students. It's a huge plus for adults who want to go back to school. It also has done a lot to really move the needle in our bucket around jobs and economic development. So when we are recruiting businesses to the state to create opportunities for jobs, it really means a lot to them that this state has focused in on education, that we have had the results we've had in K-12, and now that we have made it possible to continue to train our workforce to meet the needs of these employers who are interested in coming to Tennessee, interested in setting up jobs here. Since 2011, we've added at least 400,000 net new jobs, so that's in the time that the governor has been in office. And we're proud to say that 47% of all new jobs that are coming in are in our rural areas in Tennessee, which is a huge part of our state, is thinking about how do we provide jobs for our skilled workforce in our rural areas, and then how do we build up our workforce in those areas so that they can meet the needs of the employers. Another key thing that we're always thinking about is we've seen our median household income grow at the second fastest rate in the United States. So not only are we bringing more jobs into the state, but we're also seeing incomes rise as a result of just better paying high quality jobs, which has been a focus of the governor. So while we talk about jobs and economic development, his specific vision is to be number one in the Southeast for high quality jobs. Another big bucket of work that we spend a lot of time on is the health and welfare side of the state, and ensuring that, especially most recently, our focus has been on the opioid addiction in our state, a problem with obviously overprescription of painkillers or opioids to the population, and working strategically through an initiative called Tennessee Together to bring folks from across executive, legislative, judicial branch to really try to attack this problem together. Most recently, the bill that we passed this past session with the help of the General Assembly limits the amount of initial opioids that you can receive if you go into your doctor and you have not been receiving opioids to date. This might seem like a small step, but it is in essence limiting the number of people who end up being chronic users as they continue to be provided painkillers and stay on them for essentially too long of a period. The other bucket is public safety, and I'll probably have Todd chime in on the public safety bucket, as well as efficient and effective government.
So we, with public safety, we've had a sub-cabinet level of multiple agencies working together to make sure that we're coming up with programs that facilitate reentry back into the community after someone has been incarcerated in prison. We've also done things to enhancements of sentences for aggravated burglary and drug traffickers and domestic violence defendants who those crimes are driving Tennessee's violent crime rate. And so looking at those and looking at what we can do with people, we have almost 80,000 Tennesseans that are out of prison, but are serving time on supervision as under parole or probation. And what can we do around how we supervise them to make sure that they're getting the programming, treatment, and other things to make sure that they have a chance to be successful contributing citizens once they're through with their term of supervision. And with efficient and effective government, what we're really getting at is how can we run state government like a business? We have an extraordinary responsibility of being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And so Governor Haslam has taken a really broad approach of making sure that we're doing things that allow us to run state government better and more effectively, and that we're making sure that we set the state up to have the strongest fiscal position that it can. In 2017, we passed the Improve Act, which was the largest tax cut in state history, and at the same time provided a funding mechanism to ensure that we have a reliable stream of transportation funding dollars, so bridges, roads are safe, and also making sure that we can get people across the state in a safe and effective manner. We've also cut more than $500 million in recurring revenue and tripled the state's savings account, which is what we call the rainy day fund. And so doing that makes sure that we are still providing the right services to Tennesseans, but are putting the state in its best position possible in the event of another economic downturn, which if you look at recession cycles over the last few decades, they come and go. And so we're trying to make sure that we leave the state in a better place than we got it when the governor took office. We also have a constitutional obligation to balance the budget every year. And we've tried to ensure that we've kept Tennessee a low debt per state, and we have one of the lowest debts per capita in the country. And then finally, for only the second time in state history, Tennessee has a AAA, which is the highest bond rating you can get from all the major credit rating agencies. And that makes it easier for us to finance some of the activities that the state provides, or services the state provide to citizens just like you. On another efficient and effective government measure, we've passed the TEAM Act, which is a bill several years ago that revamped the hiring process for state government employees. And it established a robust performance evaluation system for state government employees. And rather than tying pay increases to seniority, so just because you've been here for a while, we're tying it to performance and making sure that we're incentivizing great performance by state employees who are providing critical services to Tennesseans. So those are a couple of examples of the legislation we've passed. We've partnered with the General Assembly, other stakeholders, and the departments across state government to pass over 300 administration bills during our 8 years, and have covered a lot of different ground in these buckets that Jayme described and others.
So as high school students, one of the questions that might come up is, how do I get more involved in civic work, whether it's at the local, state, or federal level? Some of the focus of my own career has been on looking specifically at programs that focus on policy. So a specific focus on public policy or public administration. There are many programs as you leave high school that will offer specific courses in those topics, and they can be pretty broad in nature, but one of the things to think about is within the policy realm, are there specific topics that really interest you? So do you want to know more about the way a budget is put together, or do you want to think about education more specifically? Safety and law enforcement can be of real interest, or health outcomes. There is no doubt that there is a lot of work to be done, not just in Tennessee, but in many states, around moving outcomes in all of these 5 key bucket areas. And so as a student, thinking about what really interests you most, and then what can be a way for you to find out more about that through your degree studies as you go into post-secondary, finding opportunities to engage with policymakers as well, is a really key opportunity as you think about your work in the future.
So as high school students, I think it's important to look for, if you're interested, look for opportunities to stay engaged and to become engaged if you're not already, and realize that you don't have to be, a lawyer or, a teacher or a police officer to be involved in this world. And so I think realizing what your passion is, and if you're in Nashville, go visit the state capitol, go to a hearing of the legislature. If you're in your local community, see what the school board's doing, or your local city council or county commission. And there are many resources online to follow what the various governing bodies at a local or state level are considering or voting on. And so finding those resources and just staying up to date on who's running for office, who's elected matters, and more than the people who sit in the General Assembly in Nashville, or who work for the executive branch like we do, make decisions every day that affect your life, your brothers and sisters, your parents' lives every day. So if there's something that you see that's a problem or an area for improvement, make sure that you let your elected officials know. I think everybody wants to hear from their constituents. And just because you may not be employed yet or in the workforce, your input still matters, even if you can't vote yet.